looking for the magic, didn't you? Where the hell's that magic? Basic mysticism and magic. So if you leave here and you don't know what the heck to look up, even though I've been telling you all these things, Liber E and Liber O is where you should start. Crowley had these as the foundational text of mysticism and magic. Each one is about 5 pages long. They're not long texts. Okay, he was very concise about it. Liber O is actually a little bit longer than that. Liber E might be a little shorter. Here's another thing for those who are following along or who might want to look this up later. Liber O and Liber E are the foundational texts of his system, and Liber E is 9. 9 is Yesod, which refers to the foundation, and also the moon. 6 is something that refers to Tiferet, or the sun. And so he's essentially saying these are the sun and moon of my system. They're the basis of my system. I haven't heard a better explanation of why these are 6 and 9, but I'm open to it. So it's Liber E vel exercitiorum, subfigure 9. That means book E, or book of exercises, under the figure of 9. Liber O, or book of the hand and the archer. I don't know why exactly. They're Kabbalistic references, I believe. Under the figure of 6. So where do you find these? They're actually kind of hard to find in a book form, but you can find them in gems from the equinox if you're looking for them in book form. Just Google them, though. Google Liber E, Aleister Crowley, or Liber O, Aleister Crowley, and you'll find them. They're also in book 4, also called Magick. So I'm just going to go through what is the basic form of magical practice that you would be likely to do as a Thelemite, right? So if you were to talk to a Thelemite and be like, what are you doing on a daily basis for your magical practices? I bet you they'll sound a lot like this, or they at least started here. Okay, so if you want to start your magical practice in the Crowleyan or Thelemic tradition, the following tips would be good to follow. So, first is to start a journal. This is called the magical record. This is your scientific illuminist lab book, which is to say you are doing a bunch of spiritual experiments known as your meditations, your rituals, and that kind of thing. And your record is the lab book that records your results, something that you'll look back on for patterns and that kind of thing. The idea is that it is worthwhile to record these things to see what works and what didn't. You know, maybe you did a meditation early in the morning for a month and recorded your results, and then you did it at night for a month, and you might be able to see when it's better for you to meditate, just as a random example. So Liber E is the source of what we take to be Crowley's instructions about the magical record. I apologize, it's very small. Deal with it. So it says, it's absolutely necessary that all experiments should be recorded in detail during or immediately after their performance. So this is Crowley in a text about mysticism calling the person, or calling them experiments that should be recorded. So this is a very intentionally scientific kind of language here. Not that you're doing science, right? You don't need to pretend like your results are going to get published in Nature or something like that. But the scientific attitude and methodology is used here. It's highly important to note the physical and mental condition of the experimenter or experimenters. So he knew that your body and your mind, the state they're in, actually affect your results, and you should write them down in order to understand how they affect your rituals and your results. Also, the time and place of all experiments should be noted, the state of the weather, all conditions that might conceivably have any result upon the experiment, either as adjuvants to or causes of the result, or as inhibiting it, or as sources of error, etc., etc. So he's saying, write down things that might affect your results. You're encouraged as an experimenter to use your own intelligence. Do not rely upon any other person or persons, however distinguished, even among ourselves. So Crowley is somewhat unique, a teacher of saying, don't even trust me, right? Do these things and figure it out for yourself. The written record should be intelligently prepared so others may benefit from its study. although no one may read your record, it's a very good idea to write it as if someone were to read it. Not in the sense that you should take out all the bad parts and leave all the good parts, but you should write in a way that's not code. I can't tell you how many people have looked back on their magical journals and they created some weird Kabbalistic symbol code of like what their rituals were, and then 2 years later they can't remember what the hell any of it means. And it's just like a bunch of chicken scratch on their record. Of course, I never did that. Yeah, I did. So the more scientific the record is, the better. Yet the emotion should be noted as some of the conditions. So this is the idea that a scientific perspective is an objective perspective, not influenced by emotions. But he's saying even emotions are part of the conditions of your experiments, of your rituals. So if you're feeling really angry, if you're feeling really sad, that's something to note in your record. Write it with sincerity and care. Thus, with practice, it will be found more and more to approximate the ideal. So those are his instructions on the record. So your homework is to start a journal, start a record, right? It often begins with a short bio, which leads up to why you have a magical record, which is to say why you started on the path. Also, Crowley recommends in Libre E a course of reading. This is actually pretty important. I think people neglect it in many discussions of mysticism, but he sticks this right into Libre E. And he says you should read all these books and understand them. Of course, he puts a lot of his own books. But we have the I Ching up here, we have the Tao Te Ching, the Upanishads, so some Hinduism, the Bhagavad Gita. We have Theosophy, the Voice of Silence. We have Raja Yoga by Swami Vivekananda, some yoga in here. The Siva Samhita, Patanjali, these are all yogic texts. Sword of the Song is Crowley's poetry. Book of the Dead, I assume he's referring to the Egyptian Book of the Dead. This is Levy's book that's now called Transcendental Magic. This is the Book of Sacred Magic of Melon the Mage we talked about earlier with the Holy Guardian Angel and the Goetia we also talked about with the preliminary invocation that comes from Greco-Egyptian papyri. Hatha Yoga Pradipika, More Yoga Molinos is a Christian mystic. Crowley actually recommended studying many Christian mystics, and he was highly influenced by them, especially St. John of the Cross and Molinos. Christian mysticism has a huge influence on Crowley's thought. He also wanted you to read the entire history of philosophy. There's many better books out now about the history of philosophy. Star in the West is an essay about his own poetry. He's a little bit self-serving. There's the Dhammapada, which is a Buddhist book. King Melinda is also a Buddhist book. 777 is that book with all the tables of Kabbalistic correspondences. Varieties of Religious Experience is a book by William James that is still read. I was actually assigned it in my psychology courses to read. It's a very good book. A book on Kabbalah and more of Crowley's essays. What do you get a sense of from this list? It's everything. You're supposed to learn all philosophy and all religion, and there's a reason for that. He's not saying, just read my stuff and forget all that false stuff that's been written by all those prophets that aren't so intelligent as I am. He's saying, no, everyone has a sliver of the truth. There's many that have come before me that have accessed that same light and tried to convey it. And by understanding these other traditions, you see the similarities with Thelema. You see the underlying truths behind all religions, behind their kind of exoteric outward shell of what they present to the world, and they look so different. But at the bottom of it, he thought you would find commonalities. So he said the pupil should endeavor to discover the fundamental harmony of these very varied works. For this purpose, you will find it best to study the most extreme divergencies side by side. So Crowley was a fan of challenging yourself. He was not a fan of intellectual safe spaces or anything like that. He really wanted you to burst your own bubble of what you thought was real, of what you thought was taken for granted, and that kind of thing. So, especially in his time, assigning a bunch of like Bhagavad Gita and Dhammapada, Upanishads, that's a pretty radical thing to suggest, that you need to understand these things at the beginning, right when you're starting these mystical exercises. So, if you're doing homework, starting a journal, and just start studying all religion and all philosophy, you'll be fine. So let's get to the basic awareness exercises. So Crowley never called these awareness exercises, although he did call them background concentration. So if you imagine normal concentration, there's something that you're focusing on in kind of the foreground of your mind. You're holding it there right then. Background concentration is stuff that happens throughout the day that kind of focuses you back to your goal. Okay? So the first thing he says, actually in Magick Without Tears, near the end of his life, he said that one of these practices is the greetings themselves, which is to say, every person you meet, you're supposed to say, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." It's in the second person, so you're saying it to them. You're basically saying, "Hey, you, do your will," right? And that itself is an awareness exercise. You're brought back to the central point. Each person is to know and do their own will. Most people don't appreciate that on the BART in the morning, and so on. I don't actually recommend doing it unless you're feeling really ballsy or really, too edgy for everyone. But there is a very useful practice of when you're in the world of kind of silently saying it to people and acknowledging that each person is a star, that each person is their own God, that each person has their own will. And a kind of conscious acknowledgement of that, of each person. Like you're sitting in a bus and that baby is freaking annoying and someone's clipping their nails onto the ground or something. And you can take that moment to do a short little meditation of greeting each person silently with the law. This can actually have a pretty profound effect on your mood, especially if the clippings are near you. It can help. I speak obviously from some experience there. So there's these greetings, and in general, these are to wake you out of your mundane consciousness, back to the fact that you're trying to perform the great work. That would, in Thelema, we understand that as knowing and doing your true will. So we have the greetings of our awareness exercises, and something called saying will. So will is something that is said before each meal. And it goes like this. So normally it's actually a call and response. Does anyone here know it enough to feel confident to say it back to me? Okay, so it goes like this. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law.
What is thy will?
It's my will to eat and drink.
To what end?
That I may fortify my body.
To what end?
That I may accomplish the great work.
Love is the law, love under will.
Fall to. Then you eat. It's that simple. You could do it for yourself. Say, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. It is my will to eat and drink, to fortify my body, that I may accomplish the great work. Love is the law, love under will. Many people do this. Now, why is this? Why are we saying will? So, first of all, we're not asking a supreme being to bless our food. This isn't saying grace. Okay? Although the will and grace kind of reference and thing is weird. But no. It's not the same idea of asking a supreme being, unless that supreme being is, of course, your true self. What's happening is we're pausing in the midst of what for many is an automatic action of eating and bringing the sacred attention to it. So we're reminding ourselves of why we're eating. Theoretically, we're eating so that we can accomplish the great work of discovering and accomplishing our true wills. It makes every meal a magical, intentional act. It actually makes every meal a kind of magical Eucharist. That is the idea, is that your food is kind of, in a sense, magically blessed or magically charged with an intention, a magical intention for you to do your will. And so not only are you greeting every single person with the law, you're now transforming your very sustenance into spiritual sustenance, so to speak. That's another thing you could add to your list. And then there's something called Resh, these solar adorations. I do not have nearly enough time to talk about this, but Resh is a solar adoration that's done at dawn, noon, dusk, and midnight. So here's a picture done by Solva et Coagula, an artist. Very good artist. Check him out. And this represents the 4 quarters. Right here is dawn. And so what you might do is there's certain magical postures and certain magical phrases that you say at each quarter. And each of these postures has certain, of course, Kabbalistic correspondences and so on. It's kind of a tantric meditation, which is to say you're using every aspect of your being, your body, your mind, your breath, everything is coordinated into this single act of a ritual adoration of the sun. So this is done in a ritualized way. It helps the practitioner remember within your daily routines that there's a larger reason for everything. It's the great work. Crowley says it's to regularize your practices, to remind yourself of the great work, and even to draw spiritual sustenance from the sun if you're more advanced, so to speak. So we're all doing homework and starting our magical practices. So we're starting a journal. We're studying everything that's ever been written, and we're beginning our awareness rituals, our greetings, and our will and our Resh. So note in your journal when these things happen. Note when you have insights when they happen. And start to memorize them. You don't need to have these things perfectly formed before you start going. So you might have to read will off of a piece of paper for a while. You might have to read Resh. So then we have our yogic exercises. We have posture, asana. We have regularization of breath, pranayama, and focus on an imagined object, dharana. This is Crowley being weird and wearing a Masonic apron while naked. Don't know why. Probably thought he was pretty cool. But these are 4 postures that he recommends in Liber E. The first one and the second two, and the last two are they're just not good for people that are Westerners. Okay, you can try them, of course, but I highly recommend you start with this. It's called the God posture, and it is done by sitting on a chair with your knees together, your arms on your legs, and meditating. This is much more natural for a Westerner than other things. The goal of this is to get rid of your awareness of your body. It's not to do a super awesome pose and take a selfie. The idea is that you shouldn't be forgetting about the body, not putting more attention on it, which many of these postures do. Imagine standing on one leg with your finger on your lip and concentrating on anything else other than balance. Or having your heel up your butt or whatever. That's what it is. So I recommend choosing the God posture and then starting on regularization of breath. So there's something called the fourfold breath that is taught, not by Crowley, but elsewhere in the Golden Dawn, which is basically counting 4 in, holding 4, breathing out 4, holding 4, in 4, holding 4, out 4. So you're counting in your head. 4 for every in-breath and holding, 4 for every out-breath and holding, and so on and so forth. And that alone is something to put your focus on, and it takes a lot of practice. If you read Liber E, he actually gives us a progressive series of longer lengths. So in for 5, out for 10, in for 10, out for 15, all the way up until a single breath lasts a minute or 2, right? The basic recommendation is start slow, don't strain yourself. That's about it. So read Liber E on pranayama. And if you're also moving on from that, you would basically focus on an imagined object. So Crowley has you focus on very simple objects like imagining a yellow square or imagining a silver crescent. Basically, what you want to do is pick one and stick with it for a long time. If you were to sit in a chair and then do pranayama for 10 minutes, and then focus on an imagined yellow square for 10 minutes, and that's all you did for 6 months, you would be ahead of 99% of people that are trying to learn magic. It doesn't sound fun, it's not glorious, but that is the basic work that is needed for all magic to work. In fact, in Liber O, it starts with, you've mastered all the stuff in Liber E, right? Okay, right? So most people just skip past Liber E and go to Liber O. I want all the magical pentagrammy stuff, right? Well, Crowley believed magical advocacy is rooted in your ability to concentrate thought. Your ability to concentrate thought is through meditating. It's that simple. He actually said you could summarize yoga as shut up. What is it? Shut up, sit down, shut up, and get out, basically. Like I said, he was very fond of telling people to shut up and do the work. So if you were to start a journal, start studying religion and philosophy, begin these awareness rituals, choose a posture and practice it, hopefully the God posture, unless you want your left to hurt, begin practicing pranayama and dharana, you would be very far along in this process. If you were still not satisfied, then you would move on to even more magical practices. So these all derive from Liber O, and I'll go very briefly through them. There's something called banishing. So banishing is, so first of all, I should say, none of Crowley's rituals require special clothing or implements. You can do pretty much them all in the nude with your finger at home. Many do. So banishing, there are many rituals for it, but they all have these factors. They involve centering yourself, something called the Kabbalistic cross in one of the traditional rituals, drawing a circle around you magically, setting a ward, some kind of symbol or object. In our case, it's usually a pentagram at each of the 4 quarters, intoning sacred words into that pentagram, and then calling guardians or archangels to those quarters, and then recentering yourself. The banishing ritual that most people are familiar with is called the LBRP, Lesser Banishing Ritual of the Pentagram. Then Crowley souped it up. Like I said, he does 2.0 versions a lot. This is his 2.0 version of the LBRP called the Star Ruby. Almost there. So, you have a journal, you're studying, you're doing all these awareness rituals like readings, will, and Resh. You're sitting down and doing your posture and your meditation, and then you're going into a magical practice of banishing. The last thing that would be part of your basic toolkit is invocation. Invocation literally means calling in the divine. There are various forms of invocation. These are the basic categories, but there are others. The first one is ritualistic. So there's something called the lesser invoking ritual of the pentagram, or the lesser invoking ritual of the hexagram, or the greater invoking ritual of the hexagram, or the supreme invoking, blah, 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 blah. There are a bunch of these Golden Dawn rituals that you can do that are very formal and ritualistic, that are technically invocations of force. They're basically like the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, but kind of in reverse with invoking. You can also invoke by orating something. So the preliminary invocation is one of those things. It's basically an oration to the Bornless One that works yourself up. If you've ever seen people in a speech working themselves up into a fervor, working the crowd up into a fervor, if you've ever seen a poet reading, bringing everyone to tears, these are all invocations of sorts of the oration type. Also, reading a passage, like from holy books, is a very strong invocation. This has been used through all religions ever. They just, read a passage from their holy text as a hymn or as some kind of sacred recitation, and that is a way to bring the sacred in, is simply speaking these words aloud. And then there's something that Crowley calls Aphrodite, Dionysus, and Apollo. So Aphrodite was the goddess of what?
Love.
Love. And Dionysus was known for wine, and Apollo was known for jamming on the lyre, so music. So basically, or sex, drugs, and rock and roll. So Crowley advocated the use of sex and drugs and music for the intentional use in ritual to make it stronger. He was very much a bad boy in this way, but in another way, he was very strict about it. That it shouldn't just be going off and partying. It should be for a very specific use. For many drugs, he was before the 60s, so he didn't even have the concept of like tripping or being high or any of this. He was actually, in a way, somewhat fortunate to be before all that. But still, you can see sex, drugs, and rock and roll are one of the most powerful ways nowadays to get you going, right? To get your energy building, to get you excited, to get that vitality inside going. And that's what invocation essentially is. It's building energy, drawing in the divine, drawing in energy, so that you can more energetically, more fully accomplish your will. Crowley will be watching you, making sure you're doing your rituals. And so basically you journal everything, all day. You should write down insights you have. You should write down that asshole at that store, whatever, major events in your day. But most importantly, you should write down the rituals and the meditations you do. Note the time, note the conditions, and the results. If anything happens or if nothing happens, just write that down. Can greet people audibly or not. Depends how you're feeling that day, I guess. say will at meals, say Resh at the 4 quarters. These are kind of your all-day things. The yoga and the magical practices are something that you have to devote some practice time to. Initially, they may take a really long time to get through, especially the magical stuff, because it's pretty technical. But once you get it down, it becomes very familiar, and it can be done very, very quickly. Someone can do a lesser banishing ritual of pentagram easily in 1 minute if they really wanted to. Not saying that it's better to do it that way, but it is possible. So set aside a time to start your posture, your breathing, your concentration, and then it's typical to go into kind of a magical practice of banishing and invoking. Some people banish again afterward. Try it out. Experiment for yourself. See if it works for you. So were you to start on a magical practice in Crowley's tradition, it almost certainly would look something like this.
93 y'all. This is EO 131 coming at you from 2020 COVID quarantine. If you made it this far in the video, you're obviously pretty interested in Aleister Crowley's system of magic and mysticism. I have personally developed an online course for Thelemic Union that allows you to study these kinds of practices and begin a magical practice of your own. This is a unique 120-day course that allows you to learn how to start, slowly build up, and integrate a spiritual practice that's based on Aleister Crowley's system of Thelemic magic. We already have a lot of students who love it, and although it's geared towards beginners, even experienced practitioners seem to be getting a lot out of it. So if you're interested, check out thelemicunion.com/magic. Let's check it out ourselves. So open up your web browser, type in thelemicunion.com/magic, and this website should pop up. You can just click that link, and it'll bring you to the course website. You can scroll through, learn about it. Here's the course curriculum. It's broken up into 30-day sections that correspond to the elements. So section 1, earth, days 1 through 30. Section 2, air, days 31 through 60. Water, and fire. It's 120 days of learning all these different practices. It's basically 20 to 30 lectures I've given jammed into one course. We have different pricing plans, so you can just do a one-time purchase, or you can do a 4 payments of $27 a month. So that's less than $1 a day for a 120-day course to learn the basics of Thelemic magic. Again, if you've come this far in the video, thank you, I appreciate it. I hope you subscribe to the channel and come along for future videos. Love is the law. Love under will.